Hi everyone, welcome to Track 2 Species Recovery. I'm Sean, your MC for today. We warmly welcome you to Track 2, and we're glad to have you here today to highlight the conservation efforts of threatened species of wild fauna and flora in Southeast Asia. Our speakers today span from 4 Southeast Asian countries, varying from government, NGO, and academic backgrounds. Together, they'll share more about their experience in conserving species in their countries, as well as within the region. We'd like to thank them in advance for sharing their experience and knowledge with the participants. If you have any questions along the way, do send them to Janelle or myself by private message using the Zoom chat, and we will try to answer as many of these questions as we can during the panel discussion. We will be joined by our moderator, Dr. Jessica Lee, today, who will be facilitating the panel discussion after the sharing in each session. Jessica heads the avian species programs and partnerships at Mandai Nature and is the coordinator for the IUCN SSC Asian Songbird Trade Specialist Group and the IUCN SSC Helmeted Hornbill Working Group. I'll hand the time now to Jessica to take over. Jessica, please.
Thanks, Sean. Sorry, that probably sounds like a mouthful for you. Okay, everyone, thank you and welcome to Track 2, Species Recovery of today's session. And this is session A. Sean, thanks for the introduction, and you pretty much covered it, but I'm Jess. I work for Mandai Nature, and I oversee all our bird partnerships and conservation programs, and that's not only in Singapore, but also across Southeast Asia. And we're quite big on not just species recovery, which is the theme for today, but also how we can incorporate habitat conservation, as well as helping communities benefit, right, from these conservation efforts in the region. Now, enough about me. We're here to listen to our 6 brilliant speakers today. So without further ado, let's kick off and start session A. We have Ms. Narissa Chow with us, who is a friend and colleague of mine and sits with us here at Mandai Nature. She'll be sharing about the IUCN SSC, which is the Species Survival Commission, Asian Species Action Partnership Program, which is also called ASAP family. Now, this is a partnership platform that strives to catalyze action and increase positive impact for species, especially ASAP species, and it does it through its partner support and building their capacity. Now, Narissa will talk a bit more about this, so I won't go into any more detail. Without further ado, Narissa, you may share your screen and show yourself. Over to you.
Hi, thank you very much, Jess, for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. Can everyone see my screen? Yep. So as Jess said, I'm the director of the Asian Species Action Partnership, and it's a real pleasure to be here today to talk to you about the conservation and recovery of highly threatened species in the ASEAN region through the lens of ASAP. I wanted to start with a sort of global context of the situation. I'm not going to go into too much detail because we've already heard from the opening speakers of the session. But this report, which Dr. Rao also alluded to a couple of years ago, which highlighted that 1 million species are threatened with extinction, really should be a wake-up call to all of us and the urgent need to address this issue. We've also heard how Southeast Asia is a global conservation priority. It falls within 4 biodiversity hotspots, illustrating the high level of species richness and endemism, but also the high levels of threat. And under this, we can see that species in this region are threatened specifically by habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation, and also the unsustainable offtake of wildlife, both through the wildlife trade and unsustainable offtake through hunting, which is particularly apparent through the snaring crisis, where there are forests in the region which are almost devoid of terrestrial fauna. So we've seen that Southeast Asia is globally important for biodiversity, but it also holds extremely high concentrations of threatened species. And this is higher than other comparable regions in the world. And these species face high levels of threat. And we've been seeing over the recent past high levels of species decline. And there are a number of species which are also at risk of extinction from pure oversight. So a number of organizations came together a few years back and identified the need for a collaborative and targeted approach to address the gaps and focus attention on this critical region in Southeast Asia. And this is really the backdrop of ASAP. So ASAP was created in response to the urgent needs to conserve species and halt extinctions in Southeast Asia. So ASAP is not an implementing organization, and we're going to hear from a number of inspiring conservationists and the work that they're doing on the ground in terms of species recovery. But at the core of ASAP, we're a partnership platform, and we're really created to support these organizations and help them be more effective with the work that they're doing. So we work to create an enabling environment to support our partners and catalyze action to increase impact for the conservation and recovery of ASAP species. And we do this through scaling up funding, strengthening capacity, and raising the profile to catalyze greater conservation action. So in terms of the partnership, we have over 200 organizations who are now signed up to the ASAP partnership. And you can see that the number of organizations joining has increased quite significantly over the past 5 years. The majority of our organizations are civil society organizations, and more than half of them are based within the Southeast Asia region. And from the map, you can see the darkest color shows that the majority of our partners are working on conservation issues in Indonesia. And we focus on a subset of some of the most highly threatened species in the region. These are known as ASAP species, and they're the land and freshwater vertebrate species found in Southeast Asia and listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. This means that they're one step away from extinction. And it's also worth noting that the majority of these species are not found in captivity. And so if we do lose them in the wild, they are extinct globally. The other really important thing to note here is that nearly 90% of these species are endemic to Southeast Asia, and the vast majority of those are single country endemic. So that means they're only found in one country within Southeast Asia. This just quickly shows you where the ASAP species are found in the region, and that Indonesia holds a very significant number of ASAP species. So as I mentioned, we're a partnership platform, and as a partnership platform, we're able to support our partners and act as a mechanism to convene stakeholders, address challenges, and catalyze conservation. So through directly working with ASAP partners, we can understand their needs and help support them by sharing information, connecting them with organizations within the partnership, but also with donors or other expertise that they might need to support their work. We work to bring organizations together around common issues and experiences and identify barriers to ASAP species conservation and recovery and work to address them to create that enabling environment which supports the work of our partners. So looking at catalyzing conservation action, we do have a focus on some of the most neglected species in the region. And these are the species which are receiving very little conservation attention, if any, drawing attention to their needs and galvanizing action. And just to illustrate this, freshwater fish make up over 1/3 of all ASAP species, and they're one of the most neglected groups. Back in December 2020, 16 freshwater fish were declared extinct in Southeast Asia. And this just really highlights the dire situation that freshwater fish are in and the desperate need for targeted conservation action to avert their extinctions. So chronic underfunding of species in general for conservation is a massive barrier to species recovery. there is not that much funding earmarked for species, and the funding that is earmarked for species tends to be for more charismatic species. But as we've just seen with the freshwater fish, there's a whole suite of other species which people don't really know about and are not receiving the funding that they need. So we work with donors to raise awareness and increase funding. And we also have a small grant program to support ASAP partners with a focus on national organizations and neglected species to really increase the number and impact that we're having on these species, and also working with donors and matchmaking with implementing organizations where their strategies and priorities overlap. Empowering regional conservation leadership is essential for long-term sustainable conservation. And there's a huge untapped potential within the region with very few training opportunities to develop the practical skills needed for species recovery. So we've been working to create training opportunities for ASAP partners and provide ongoing mentoring and looking at the organizational capacity and support to partners to help fill this gap. In 2021, so last year, we launched the ASAP Women in Conservation Leadership Program. And this was really in recognition that women still remain underrepresented in the conservation sector. They still face gender-related challenges to their work and opportunities, and a way of supporting women reach their potential in conservation and reach leadership and be able to fulfill leadership roles. So we had over 50 applications for a very limited number of spaces, showing that there's a real demand and interest in this type of training. And we currently have 14 women from 6 countries across Southeast Asia who are part of this program, which involves a mixture of formal training, networking sessions, and tailored webinars. And we work to create a supportive environment for participants to learn, not just from the formal training, but also from each other and be able to share experiences and support one another. And we can see already from the initial 6 months of the training program, 92% of participants already feel more empowered as women working in conservation. So the lack of awareness for the urgent conservation needs of ASAP species in particular across the board is also a major barrier to their conservation. And we do need much greater engagement and support for ASAP species conservation and conservation of all threatened species. So we work to conduct targeted communications to profile ASAP species and also showcase the incredible work that our partners are doing on the ground. This is just some of the different ways of communication that we use. We have our website and then social media challenges, also speaking at events, and we have a number of publications. Just to highlight one of them, alongside the IUCN SSC Asian Wild Cattle Specialist Group, last year we published a position paper on Sowler and a call to conservation action to save this species from extinction. And just to end the presentation, just today, to coincide with World Wildlife Day, we've released a report, Halting Species Loss in the ASEAN, which was a collaborative effort with the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. And it calls for bold and urgent action to secure the region's extraordinary biodiversity. So it provides a review of the threats and various conservation measures and efforts, along with a policy context around threatened species in the ASEAN region, and provides key recommendations for conservation and recovery of highly threatened species. And as shown from this report, conservation action needs to take many different forms. And I just want to highlight that there is a role for everyone to support these efforts. And I really encourage you to get involved and contribute wherever you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Narissa, for that wonderful presentation. Up next, we have Mr. Loh Bing-Wen from NParks. So today, Bing-Wen will be talking about the Species Recovery Program under the National Parks Board, which was introduced in 2015, and has the aim of conserving Singapore's native flora and fauna through various protection methods. This presentation essentially provides an overview of the program and some of the key takeaways from it from the last 7 years of recovery efforts in Singapore. Let's all welcome Bing Wen to the screen, please. Bing Wen, over to you.
Thanks, Jess. Give me a moment to share my screen. So I hope everyone can see the screen that I've shared. Thanks for the affirmation. So afternoon, everyone. My name is Bing Wen, and as Jess mentioned, I work in the National Parks Board in Singapore. The purpose of this presentation this afternoon is to give you guys a quick overview of Singapore's species recovery program and some of the takeaways that I have gleaned from overseeing this program for the past 7 years. So we will start off with a brief background of the program. The program was introduced first in 2015, as just mentioned, as part of the Nature Conservation Master Plan. And in itself, this master plan was meant to outline the National Parks Board's efforts to coordinate and strengthen biodiversity conservation efforts in Singapore. So as you can see from the image below, the species recovery program is one of the trusts that underpin this master plan. And the overarching objective of the program is to ensure the long-term survival of threatened flora and fauna in Singapore through both in situ and ex situ recovery actions, which means actions that can be undertaken both in the habitat that the species inhabit as well as in places outside of that habitat. To date, we have 80 plant and 40 animal species on the program, and we do have an aim to implement recovery efforts for up to 100 plants and 60 animal species by 2030. So the taxa under this program come in all shapes and sizes. You have plants like the endemic Singapore ginger on the extreme left, to aquatic life like our very own Singapore freshwater crab, and it also covers marine organisms such as the Neptune's cup sponge. Because I myself worked a lot on the animal aspect of this program, the two featured species that I intend to show today are both animals, but they're not quite, I would say, the charismatic or cute and cuddly animals that you're used to, but they nonetheless have benefited from being under this program through a variety of actions that have been undertaken to help them. So the first of which is a Singapore special. I think a lot of people in the audience would be familiar with this. The Singapore freshwater crab is actually a very small freshwater crab, no bigger than the palm of your hand. And it's found only in a few hill streams that left in the country. So it has been classified as globally critically endangered by the IUCN. And in recognition of its precarious situation, there was a widespread support for the formation of a multi-stakeholder freshwater crab working group some years ago to oversee implementation of the recovery efforts for this species. Now, this working group, I would say back then was one of the first working groups out there, and it includes Parks Board. It had academic institutions like the National University of Singapore, and it also had expertise from Wildlife Reserve Singapore, which I guess is the predecessor to the Mandai Wildlife Group now. So one of the first things the working group set out to do was, like for any species recovery program, is you want to find out more about the species that you're conserving. So a lot of effort was put into conducting research into the crab's habitat preferences to find out what streams it liked. Were there other streams in the area that it could survive in? And the ultimate goal was to at least allow for successful translocation to a new stream. And it has taken a while, but we are happy to note that there have been a successful translocation of the crab to a new stream, which has undoubtedly improved its range and hence its survival prospects. Another key strategy that was highlighted was that there was a need to maintain some sort of assurance population in captivity. So one of the things that the working group set out to do was to develop a purpose-built facility and a sort of protocol and capacity building to raise these crabs in captivity. And through all the experience gained through the years, one of the important breakthroughs that was had was that the team found out that by raising crab eggs to maturity in captivity, it substantially improved the crablet survival rates as compared to in the wild. So what this meant is that you not only have an assurance population that you can study and maintain, but you also in turn have individuals to facilitate translocation efforts. So all of this work combined has definitely improved the long-term survival prospects of this endemic species that is found only in Singapore. The next species that I'm going to feature is another small critter, and this one is noteworthy because it required a novel conservation approach to help it due to its unusual breeding biology. So this is a cinnamon bushfrog. It's another small frog that, unlike many of its cousins that you might be familiar with, only lays its eggs in tree cavities filled with water instead of ponds and water bodies. So as you would imagine, a habitat like that is pretty hard to find, especially in Singapore. So the species is nationally threatened and confined largely to our nature reserves. So as part of recovery efforts, one of the incidentally, a student research project actually that was conducted by NUS actually found that these frogs were quite happy to breed in artificial containers that were placed in suitable habitat. And there was nothing fancy about these containers. They were essentially just your everyday food takeaway containers that you filled with some leaf litter, added some water, and then you just put a branch or two for the frogs to lay their eggs on. And it was found that they were quite happy, as you can see from the picture, to do their thing and lay their eggs on these branches because it sort of mimics them laying the eggs on the walls of these tree cavities. And then when the tadpoles hatch, they just drop straight into the water below and they start their lives. So armed with this knowledge, we devised a plan to try to establish a population of these frogs in the Singapore Botanic Gardens, which is a small primary rainforest that we have in the southern part of Singapore. Now, one of the difficulties with working with frogs, as some of you might know, is that because they breathe through their skin, they are quite sensitive to environmental change. And so we didn't want to translocate them directly because it was probably not very good for the adult frogs. And I guess you could say the team had a eureka moment of sorts when what they found out purely by accident was that what you could actually do was you could follow on from the research work and place the artificial containers within the nature reserves for the frogs to breed in. And then rather than translocating the adult frogs, you would let the eggs hatch and you would essentially bring the entire container with the tadpoles to your translocation site, because when they're living in their little water-filled container, they're quite happy and they're relatively immune to the stresses around them. So it obviously takes quite a while for them to mature into adult frogs, but it's very encouraging to know that there is now a self-sustaining population of these frogs in the rainforest. And to carry on from that, what we have then proceeded to do is to start gradually phasing out these containers to actually upgrade their housing, as it were, to actual tree cavities made from recycled logs, because they're much more naturalistic and they blend in with the surrounding landscape. So the frogs are equally happy to use this, and they have continued to breed and expand within the rainforest. So I think these two featured species quite neatly summarize some of the key takeaways that I have gleaned from the program. So the first and foremost, I suppose, is that under any recovery program, species prioritization and your reasons for prioritizing these species are always important. And the reason being that regardless of which country we are in, there is always a lot of species that need help. And often the issue is that there's not enough resources or there are limited resources to work with. So fortunately or unfortunately, there's always a need to prioritize species. And it is important to have reasons for why you do this. I won't go into too much detail because without spoiling too much, this will be one of the topics discussed in the panel discussion, but broadly, there are always scientific and non-scientific reasons. So scientific reasons can be things like a species being only found in your country or your country being a global stronghold for it. But at the same time, there are also non-scientific reasons that we have to keep in mind. It is always easier to garner support for recovering charismatic species or cute and cuddly animals. That has generally been the way of things. And this leads on to the next point, which is that for any recovery program, a collaboration is always vital. Because the expertise is always scattered and the support that you might need is scattered across a wide range of sectors. So you can only get so far if you try to go at it alone. The next thing that I found was immensely helpful was that for every species, you want a well thought out action plan. And the reason for this is that there is a reason why a lot of these species are threatened, and often there is no magic bullet for where you can just fix their problems overnight. A lot of recovery efforts can be very long, drawn out affairs that take years to see results. And by having an action plan where your thought process and the actions you plan to undertake as a practitioner are documented, you can always refer to the guiding document as you go and see how you're doing, whether things need to be switched up, things like that. And last but not least, technological advancements have undoubtedly helped biodiversity conservation immensely. You do read reports these days of all sorts of technologies, from machine learning to GPS trackers to other fancy equipment that have undoubtedly helped many species. But at the same time, as species like the cinnamon bushfrog show, sometimes the answer is in plain sight. All you need is some everyday equipment and some imagination, and you could well be on your way to helping a species achieve a much better conservation outcome. So on that note, I've come to the end of my presentation. I will pass the time back to Jess. Thank you.
Thanks, Beng-Wen, for that fascinating talk, especially about all the little hidden nuggets of information you found when you work with all those little species. Quite little, actually. Okay, so now we're moving on to our third speaker, who's also the last speaker for track 2, session A. And we have Mr. Vosakbal. So today, Vosek, we're talking about his experiences working in the rice plains. So we're now moving from Singapore, largely, and more to now a very specific country in Southeast Asia, Cambodia. And this is the rice fields of the Underfunding wetlands. And he'll be explaining a bit more about his efforts to conserve a really iconic bird, but it's also really threatened, and that's the Sarus crane. So let's welcome Vosek, please. Vosek, whenever you're ready, over to you.
Thank you, Jess. Let me share my screen.
That's a wonderful background, Vosek.
Yeah, this, we just took yesterday from our side. So this is I would like to show the side we are working, and today I'm going to present this landscape. Okay. Thank your organizer for inviting me to join this session, and would like to join the world to celebrate World Wildlife Day. And today in Cambodia, we host a campaign called Zero Snaring in the protected area. So Nature Like Cambodia, which is BirdLife in Cambodia, one of the key partner of this campaign. Okay, back to our topic for of my presentation today. I would like to present the work that Nature Like Cambodia have been done on the ground to recovery the species of saroscran in one area in Lower Mekong Delta called Long Springs. In short, you can call AP. Yes. So I don't know whether the participant today know about the saroscran. Saroscran, there's at least 3 subspecies in the world. The subspecies in Australia, the subspecies in South Asia, and the subspecies in Indochina. So I'm not going to talk about this subspecies in Australia and South Asia, but I will present about the subspecies in Southeast Asia, which is called Antigone sapi. Currently, the list of vulnerable species in the IUCN Red List. This is the tallest flying bird in the world. It's almost 1.6 meter. And this is a short migratory bird. It's migrate, during the nesting season, it's nest in the dry Giptuka forest in Eastern Plain of North and Eastern Plain of Cambodia, and during the wintering season and non-breeding seasons, they move from the dry forest to the wetland around Tonle Sap in Lower Mekong Delta, and some of them even move to Vietnam side in Cambodia. Nature Like Cambodia, previously called BirdLife Does Not Cambodia program, we are working and we monitoring this species more than 15 years. We have witnessed that this species, the subspecies about decline about 77% in last 8 years. I mean, the equal 10% per year. As you see in the graph, is in 2013 we record in Cambodia and Vietnam up to 850, and 2020 only 194. We just conclude recently in 2021. I didn't include in the chart. We record only 164. It means we still go in down. So what is the threat to this species? Yeah, so the same as the speaker mentioned during the open ceremony already. The habitat loss is one of the key drivers that lead to decline of this species, and both in the wintering side and nesting side. And moreover, we see that increase the mortality rate based on the monitoring. We see that more less juvenile compared to adult. So this is something that we need to find out. And moreover, from time to time, we see the wetland side introduced with unsustainable agriculture, a lot of pesticide, chemical pesticide, herbicide, and fertilizer have been used. And this is somehow direct lead to poisoning, either direct or indirect poisoning to the bird. Moreover, we also identify the lack of knowledge. We still don't know much about the crane movement during the nesting side, and then probably bird somewhere else during the wintering side. This is something just example of lack of knowledge. And of course, because of habitat loss, we also impact on the food. We see the food short of the saroscran also the problem for the crane as well. And another one, a really important one, is human disturbance. Human disturbance is right now very key threat, because in Cambodia in the past, as you may know, we have civil war. Most of our forest side located in remote area, but since 1993 we got peace, and then more development, so infrastructure development everywhere, and most of our forests not remote anymore. The humans reached most of our part of the country, include the area where the saroscran nesting. So while the area infrastructure there, the people in there is there is a hot feral dog or hunting dog in there. So the bird like saruscan that nesting underground hugely impacts while they are nesting. So I move back to the general information about saruscan in Cambodia and Vietnam, more specific to the site in the Long Pring, where we are working and want to present this. This is important bird and biodiversity area. There's only one flyway network site currently available in Cambodia. It's located in the coastal zone of Cambodia in the Kampot province, as you see in the maps next to Vietnamese borders. This site really important. Is one of the three important sites in Cambodia that government, wintering site in Cambodia that government of Cambodia recognize and designate as a protected as a reserve area for saruscans. Every year it supports at least 40% of saruscan. So saruscan spend about 6 months wintering in these landscapes. While we identify this area as important bird and biodiversity area, we show that at least 1,000 hectares of this landscape should be protected. But because of the developing and because of land tenure, we're not able to protect all that 1,000 are required. As you see in the chart, the trend of declining is the same as a national population. So because it shares more than 40%, so in 2013, we used to record more than 340 birds, but in 2020, we record only 100 birds. So we also monitor the threat on the ground. So the habitat loss is one of threat that we more worry in this area because it's located in next to the Vietnamese border. There is development projects come up. For example, there is the project what we call economic zone that the plan of Ministry of Commerce with our colleague in Vietnam to set up the market along the border, which is require a huge area for convert to be a residential market, and this project also lead to increase of land speculation. This is something that people can sell their land to the outsider local people, and this the same as the other landscape. There are more infrastructure development in this area. So the wetland that we are concerned. 10 years ago, there is no road, but right now there is a road running across. So this is lead to change the water regimes. And then while we change the water regime, also lead to decline some food soil, especially Elocharis which is a very important food soil for the saruscan while they spend 6 months in there. And moreover, beside the Elocharis doggies, the crane also eat rye in the local rye field. The same as general threat in the nationwide. Unsustainable agriculture also come up. The people want to get more yield. People easy to access the chemical substance, both fertilizer and herbicide. So we see from year to year, the farmer try to use more herbicide and chemical herbicide and pesticide. And that's why in 2019, we record about 8 cranes die because of toxic. The people there is not intend to poisoning, but this kind of unsustainable agriculture may the root cause that make that 9 saruscans die in 2019. Yeah. So what we want to do while we see the threat and the trend of the species decline or more than 70% like that. So Nature Like Cambodia, they work in these areas in 2004. We want to ensure the Long Pring AP become what we call Saroscan friendly landscape. We would like to recover the Saroscan population through combined effort on our increased foraging and protection the habitat from the human impact. So the goal we want to achieve is, the objective we want to achieve is, the first one, we need to ensure the local key roosting site of the Saroscan within this landscape is protected, not convert to a supermarket or convert to other kind of land use. We would like to ensure that the rice field still provides food source to the Saroscan. So need to address this food source, and as well as yellow cherry donkeys that declines because of change water regime. We need to ensure that the food source is still available. And of course, the rice field or local people play a key role. We need to ensure that the rice field available in this landscape still maintain the role in support the Saroscan. And then to ensure that the rice field can be protected, at least we need to work with local community. We need to encourage local support to protect the Saroscan. So this is the format objective that we are doing, and we work this in 2004 up until now. So what we expect from our long-term investment in this area, we hope that at the end of, we hope that the protected habitat of Saroscan in AP is much larger. And then the rice field is saved by through introduce the sustainable agriculture, what we call Saroscan friendly rice. And we hope that food shortage and the poisoning will be addressed. Yeah. So so far, what we have been achieved. To ensure, answer to the expectation to save the habitat, we also advocate government to designate this area as protected. As a result, in 2011, the government be able to designate only 217 hectares of this landscape as protected area. The remaining areas could not, because it belonged to local community. So we cannot create conflict with the local community. So we need to work with the local community through sustainable agriculture. The way that we are working with the local community, the first one, we try to lease the land, especially the area that's located next to the key roosting site of the Saroscan. So that's why in 2020, we be able to lease 18 hectares from the more than 450 family you see in the red dot. This is really important, located right in the middle of the 217 hectares. Is next to the roosting site. The people calling you to do what we call to be a resident or change this land for other kind of land use will be huge impact on the ground. So that's why we would like to lease and then introduce the conservation measurement. So what we introducing, after lease, we introduce sustainable agri Saroscan friendly rice cultivation on this leasing land. We would like to address the food shortage. We grow the rice that Crane like to eat. There is 2 native rice variety that Crane like to eat. So we grow this, and then we harvest only 50% and remaining 50% for the Crane to eat. We work in collaboration with local farmer. This is showing the activity. This slide showing our activity on the ground, and this is a map showing our the way that we harvest in order to maintain some to keep some rice for Crane on the grounds. Yeah, 18 hectare is not enough. We need to work more with the local community. So we need to introduce this sustainable agriculture concept to the local communities. So this Saruscan friendly rice cultivation also introduced to the community rice field. As you see in the orange dot, we not list as 10 years like we list 18 hectares, but we try to, because these local people need to depend on this rice field for their daily life, for their annual income. So we need to work with them and introduce the sustainable agriculture, the way of growing rice in that friendly to the Saruscan. So this just introduced last year, and then we have the 51 farmer collaborate with the project. We want to enlarge more. The farmer who collaborate with the project need to measure the lands, and then need to follow the criteria, which is 12 criteria that's recognized as the crane-friendly rice use. And then one of the most important one, they need to grow the variety that crane like to eat, the species, rice species that like to eat, and agree to keep 5% for cranes to eat in subsidize for incentive. The project will provide agricultural technical training to them, also provide organic fertilizer to them, and also have to find the market that let the people can sell their rice in the premium price. Yeah, moreover, we also introduce the scheme that we call community-based agriculture hazardous waste management, because of there is so far the increase of using chemical fertilizer, chemical pesticide, herbicide, and also there is no system for management. We see the waste is thrown to the water channel, and thrown to the next to the rice field. This is one of the main reasons that make the bird die. So we introduce this and as a community based. So this means what does it mean community based? It is led by the community and managed by community. So we introduced for 3 years right now. So we see that from the rice field, keep in the box that we set up, and then move to dispose in the system that recognized by Ministry of Environment. Yeah. So yeah, this is this slide just showing the result of our monitoring in our rice field last year. We see that our rice field right now play important role in provide food source to the cranes. We keep 50%. We see the cranes can eat up. I mean, as you see in the charts, they spend 75% of the crane present in theirs is foraging in this rice field, but they can the rice that left in the field can be supplied only 1 month only. This is something that we need to work more. We need to enlarge our areas to ensure they can supply more than 1 month, because the crane will live up until May before they go to the nesting site.
So boss, we need to wrap up, please.
Yeah, okay. So then, yeah. And also we try to promote this the rice. So so the new brand called Grand Rice is available in national market, but not yet well known yet. But we are in the process of promoting this. And then we got support from Ministry of Environment on this initiative. Yeah, the challenge. I will not go all of this because time is gone. But what we worry is the landscape is still in developing, and more people from outside want to grab the land inside the landscape. So this is something that we need to act as soon as possible in order to ensure the landscape not change much. If the landscape change so much, will be impact on the crane, and then the AP cannot secure as the the crane-friendly landscape. Yeah, the next step, we need to increase the number of collaborate farmer. We hope that more people joining don't sell their rice field to the outsider, but select to grow grain rice. There's something that can help to maintain the landscape friendly for Sarus grain. Yeah, and then promote grain rice, because right now we have product but are not yet accepted by the market. And then we need to develop a long-term management plan to address the threat that happen on the ground. Thank you, Jess. Sorry, a bit over.
No worries.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rosak, for taking us on this very nice tour of your program in Cambodia, especially with your visuals at the back.
Yeah.
Could everyone, give a virtual round of applause for our session A speakers for track 2, please. They've done brilliantly. I've also got some background noise, so please tell me if you can hear it, and I'll move somewhere. So now it's time to open our panel discussion for session A. And thanks in advance, and to everyone who's already submitted questions in our chat box. We'll try to answer them as much as we can. We do have limited time in this panel discussion to address all of them, so there will be some follow-up later on. Could we get Narissa, Bingwen, and Rosak back, please? So please share your screens and show yourselves so we can have this, we can start the panel discussion. We're still waiting for, brilliant. Okay, cool. So I'll start off with the first question, and then we'll take some questions in a bit. So I think my first question is for Narissa. And Narissa, so you talked a lot about partnership building, and that's what ASEP's all about, not just building a network, but also building capacity. So I guess maybe if we could just articulate and summarize for the audience here the importance of this capacity building, but also the role of people in species conservation and recovery, right? People, when you talk about species recovery, people often think about animals and forget there's actually people, behind those efforts. So maybe we could speak a little bit about that. That would be awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. And it's a really good question. Like you say, when you talk about species recovery, the focus is often on just the species. But as we've heard from the other talks, species recovery is extremely challenging and complex. It involves a number of different disciplines, and it goes beyond just having the knowledge and understanding of the biology and ecology of the species in question. It usually requires a hugely diverse set of skills alongside the technical skills, which are more commonly associated with conservation and species work. And these might range from project management, raising and managing funds, communications, negotiations, and we saw at the end the challenges which Borzak's identified, which are forever changing and unpredictable. But people skills are also really essential because people, like you mentioned, play an integral role in the issues around species recovery, both in terms of often the challenges that we're trying to address, but they're also part of the solution. So, they often might be involved in the threats which are, leading to the issues we're trying to address with species. And so to address these threats, we also need to address, what they are, and that involves the people involved. And so we do need to have the ability to engage with people effectively. And I think often there's a very unrealistic expectation that conservationists, and this is changing, but historically and still probably in a lot of cases, still come from more of a biology background. And once you start working in the field of conservation, you're expected to be able to cover all of these different areas and needs with minimal training and support. And so equipping conservationists with these other skills, I think is really essential if we want to be able to be really effective in species recovery programs and ensure that we're really supporting the people who are best placed to deliver these programs. So giving those opportunities and training and capacity in different areas from the usual kind of technical biology background. I think the other thing to note is that there are a number of small organizations which are really working at the forefront of species recovery programs. and they might be the only organization or individuals who are saving a particular species from extinction. And they might be very small with very limited resources. So how can we really help strengthen their capacity and their ability to address these challenges better? And so I think strengthening capacity at both the individual and organizational level is hugely important, ensuring that we empower conservation leaders, especially in the places where the species are occurring, and building up strong national organizations is really key for long-term sustainability.
Awesome. Thanks for that. A really complex issue working with people, but also really essentials. And it's funny you mentioned soft skills, right? People often forget even about the soft skills that you actually need, right, when it comes to stakeholder engagement, and relationship building is so key in actually driving or facilitating rather conservation action.
Yeah, they often actually take up more
The bulk.
time and space than
right,
teaching
on the
people.
So for people out there, we need more people in conservation, and try to balance that imbalance, right? There's a lot of animal people who can only talk animals.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a question here for Bing Wen next. So Bing Wen, you mentioned a lot of species, 80, 40, 100, there's a lot of species, 100 over species, I think that you mentioned in your presentation. And you also highlighted a few key species. And you also mentioned, you touched a little bit about how you prioritize or how you select the species for the recovery programs. I guess maybe for the purpose of the audience here, who are, a combination of Singaporeans and non, people from the region, to have a sense of how you actually go about, right, developing or selecting, what's the criteria, I guess, for selecting a species that goes into the program. How do you prioritize after after you select and you shortlist of the hundreds of species, you get to, I don't know, 200. What's the next step in the shortlisting and prioritizing? And if you could furnish that with some examples beyond those that you've highlighted in the talk, that would be awesome.
Thanks, Jess. Yep, can certainly do that. So actually, that's a very common question that we get about, how we in Singapore do our prioritization exercise. So I think for those of you in the audience, usually the first starting point probably is the most obvious one, where, as Nerissa mentioned, a lot of the countries have endemic species that are only found in that particular country. So that was one of our key initial, I would say, pillars of the conservation program, where understandably you would highlight some of these, no matter how small and obscure they are, to enter the program. And then what came next was a bit more on a local context thing. So I think you've heard a lot from us, which is that a lot of the work we've been doing collectively involves animals, and sometimes it's often forgotten that as some of my botanist colleagues like to say, without plants, there are no animals. So a lot of being the National Parks Board, where, one of our core jobs is the management of greenery as a whole, there was a desire to try to marry the plant side of the recovery program and the animal side. So we actually do have a fair amount of animals that function either as frugivores or seed dispersers that are meant to complement our plants. So some examples that we can put out there are things like the slow loris, for example, or fruit-eating birds like the green imperial pigeon, maybe even the straw-headed boo-boos that some of you might be familiar with. And the reason for this is that because our colleagues found that in Singapore, fragmentation of our forests is a big problem. And a lot of these rare plants, they basically need direct human intervention to bring them from one place to another. So if you help the animals that can disperse these seeds for you in turn, they do bring some sort of benefit to the ecosystem as a whole, because you don't have to rely on people to collect the seeds and wait for fruiting seasons all the time, because sometimes these trees or shrubs are in inaccessible areas. So there was a big focus on that, where you would try to marry species, if you will, that are not very common in Singapore, because they might eat fruits or have some more specialized diets with plants that they can help with. And then, of course, on the marine side of the house, for those marine biologists in the audience, there's also the idea of ecosystem builders. So those of you who dabble in marine ecology, you would know that hard corals are considered the cornerstones of coral reefs, where, you know, if you help conserve them or you try to replant corals and create artificial reefs, in turn, you can build your own communities, thriving communities, without needing to dabble into like every single reef inhabiting species. So a lot of the marine work involves growing coral nubbins in our nurseries. And in Singapore, we actually have surprisingly a large number of hard coral species, over 250 of them. So we only work on a small percentage of them that the local experts have identified as being particularly endangered, but the core concept is that you would raise them in captivity and actually try to create artificial reefs, because they in turn will help sustain everything that depends on the coral reef. So I think that's just some brief insight into how we go about with prioritizing our species.
And that's really important, because as it's articulated many times already, a lot of resources and investment has to go into conservation. So it's not a cheap process, right? So prioritizing is key, right? Because you want to really focus on those species that are really threatened, but also where there's low-hanging fruit, so to speak, right? Where you can quickly address some of those impacts and tackle the key threats, right? To ensure that populations don't decline too drastically. So this whole thing of prioritization is a key part of the conservation planning process. Okay, Rosak, on to you. So, you know, you talk a lot about rice. Rice is often linked to people because a lot of people eat rice, especially a lot of us here in Asia, right? Rice is a staple part of our diet. You also mentioned the conservation program around the Saros crane that you hope to see, right, continue to as long as we can, right, to eternity, so to speak. So I guess talk about rice in communities and people and the species. How important is it, maybe to share the audience, right? How important is it for conservation programs to be self-sustaining, you know, on the long term, right? Because you need people, animals, right, to continue forever, right? And they'll be protected. And then what are some of your, what do you think for your program are some of the key approaches or the immediate next steps, right, to achieve that sustainability?
Thank you, Jeff. Mostly it's a bit hard to answer the question, because most of the project they usually asking about the sustainability of the activity, but the project activity include the conservation project as well. I answer to your question for this Saros crane project. We built up after several years, try to understand or try to identify the approach that to ensure sustainability. For us, we identify some key points that we think that can help to ensure sustainability. The first one is the support from local community. It means in the both knowledge as well as interact with the conservation activity. And secondly, we be able to promote the product, what we call wildlife friendly product or biodiversity friendly product to the consumer, to the public, be able to pay some to ensure some environmental responsibility. So for the Grand Ride project, the first thing we would like to ensure that local people is in support and interact with this. To let the people support, interact, and engage with this, we need to ensure they're not impact with on their livelihood. I see the question in the chat as well. The audience asking how to let people keep 5% of their rice for the crane. So at the moment, we provide technical training to the local community. So the collaborative farmer got knowledge, which is impact. And then secondly, knowledge here is technical training on agriculture. Secondly, we also inform them about important of the right of the service grant that are present in their community. If they're still there, it means the ecology in their the treasure of their the wetland within their community will not lost. So if the people believe in this, they somehow will engage with this. So this message not only sent to the farmer but also sent to the local the kid from the primary school and let them have that kind of knowledge. So come back to the second part is the public responsibility. We right now we would like to inform that there is the right that we be able to that the people can, the consumer like the Asian people can select and show some responsible to the conservation. So this is something that we need to promote more, and we see that some model already have some success like Ibish rice and the other community that already apply in other country like coffee or the other. That is something that already apply. So this current right is the new idea. Then we will learn from that, and we will promote both in national and in the regional in the future for the next step. And then the money that we got from this from this selling, we hope that can help us to maintain the growing the investment on the ground, which is can left 50% for grant to eat, or can subsidize 5% to the local people live for the grant on that. So that the answer to the gentleman in the question is, we hope that the money that earned from selling the right can pay 5% that the people are left on the ground. But right now we still depend on donor, frankly speaking, because it's just a year two period, first 2 year project. Yeah.
Thanks for explaining that in a bit more detail for everyone. That's really helpful. So now I've got some general questions for all of the panel members. This entire session is about species recovery, and we've heard that term multiple times in the last half an hour. So I suppose maybe to start off with, Ross, like you this time around, and we'll go in the reverse manner. How would you define and quantify success in your species recovery program? Or in another way, how do you measure impact? Right? How do you know that, yeah, it worked, right? It's positive, the impact is positive. Maybe we could just share the audience a little bit. That would be great.
Yeah, this for us, we the success of first, the species is not extinct. Second, stable, or a little increase. And so far, I worked in this sector for more than 15 years. We always said it's still stable. Yeah, if we be able to maintain it stable, it's successful enough. But some species, we are lucky that they are increased. But most of them is go down, decline, more decline. So we hope that they are not decline from the world. We still save him even they are in the age of decline. We can still save them. But for the Saruscan right now, I come back to the species that I focus right now. At the age of declining, so we need to ensure that 164 population that we count still there. In next 5 years is still there. We don't hope it will be increased, because a lot of elements that we need to understand that too ambitious to say that it will be to set target that it will be increased.
So very long term, it's a long-term process, right? Yeah. So you're in it for the long haul. Okay, Bing-Wen, maybe over to you, and just a reminder that we don't have much time left, so maybe not to keep your answers too verbose. How do you define or quantify success, or what does success mean to you, Bing-Wen? Thank you.
So I guess Vosak has already mentioned some of the tangible aspects. So I think for me personally, there is a certain gratification from the intangible side of things. So as you heard, in Singapore, a lot of the species are tiny and no one really sees them. And I mean, for better or worse, they don't really know a lot about them. So if you go into casual conversation with people and they know that, oh, Singapore has like 3 species of endemic crabs, I do feel a measure of success, even though it's pretty hard to quantify these things. But I think beyond objective results like increasing the species distribution or stabilizing their population, getting people to be more aware and to have some buy-in to your programs is always, there's a certain gratification associated with it.
No, great answer, because education is the first step, right? As they always say. And as we heard throughout this entire talk, right, people are key in species recovery. So if you don't educate the common man or the person, right, you don't really achieve much in conservation, I guess. So, okay, Narissa, for you to end off this round, yeah, how would you define or quantify success? I know yours is a mixed bag, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very challenging because ultimate species recovery is a very long-term goal, and we're not going to see it, you know, for some species in, you know, over a period of several decades. So I think it's important to look at, you know, different steps along the way, and we make sure that we do sort of communicate them and celebrate those different steps. And like Bingwen just said, in terms of raising awareness, and if you have managed to increase awareness and support for species conservation, that's obviously a big success, because we know that people are really important. So changing behaviors in a positive way for conservation and species. I mean, there's lots of different steps, and obviously it depends on the species, but I think we can't just look at the big overall goal, because otherwise we're kind of missing all the important steps in between, which lead to that important ultimate goal, which we're striving for.
Thanks, Narissa. I think we're hearing a lot of, you know, conservation. If you're doing it, you're in it for the long haul. It's not something that happens overnight or in the short term, right? This is something that takes years, right, for us to see any tangible impacts on wild populations. So we'll just end off, you know, like I said, we don't have much time, so we'll just end off this first session. The speakers already addressed some of the questions in the chat in their answers, but they'll try their best later on. So speakers, if you could maybe type in your answers to those questions relevant to you in the chat, that'll be great. But to just end this panel session, could each of you, and we'll start with Narissa and go the other way now, maybe give the audience here one piece of advice on, you know, what's a big takeaway, I guess, message that you've learned for conservation, you personally as a conservationist, right? And how would you advise them? Because we've got a lot of people here who are looking at maybe pursuing conservation as a, you know, a future job or occupation. Right, to you, Narissa.
Difficult one. I think, you know, first of all, patience, like we've heard, is a slow process, so you can't expect always to see immediate results. I think another key thing which I've learned, and to kind of be aware of that right in the beginning of your career, is sort of understanding that getting buy-in and support from such a wide range of stakeholders is so important for conservation, so that you really need to try and understand things and see things from other people's perspectives as well, and be open to sort of listening to others, but also questioning your own views and assumptions, because it's very easy to think that you might know the answer, and that, you know, these people who don't support conservation, they don't have valid points or opinions. But I think really the issues are so complex, and the approaches to solving them are difficult, that we need to be open to a whole range of potential solutions and really be able to listen and communicate and see things from different perspectives if we want to be successful.
Totally agree with that. Bingwen, over to you. One key piece of advice or a takeaway message that you'd like to share with the audience.
I think for me, I'm a bit more of a realist. So I always remember what one of my professors told me when I was still an undergraduate student, which is that being a conservationist is one of the most depressing jobs in the world. So treasure all the little victories that you can take. And I think for species recovery, it can be simple things like getting a bush frog to lay an egg in your food takeaway container. You got to treasure all of this, because I think a lot of you young people out there, I mean, I don't mean any offense to anyone, but often you start out very idealistic, and then once you get in, as Jess said, you know, it's a long haul thing. There's no magic bullet. You might get worn down. So sometimes just take those victories and enjoy them, because I can tell you that it's pretty hard to win the overall war, if you will.
Awesome, thanks. Rosak, okay, we only have less than a minute. Rosak, over to you. What's
Okay.
the key?
Yeah. For me, I think that I would like to say that being the conservationist, we will not reach like a businessman, but the key success for us is seeing the species, seeing the nature is safe. So bear in mind and don't lose your track. If you want to be a conservationist, yeah, see the nature, see the species still there. This is your success, not money. Thank you. That's
Thanks so much, Rosak. Okay, so this actually ends our session A of track 2. So thank you. Maybe if you could join me for pausing virtually our speakers for session A. I think it was brilliant talks, and we learned a lot, especially about the element, the human element, and conservation. So now moving on to part B, we're actually starting off with Dr. Wong Siu Tee. So Dr. Wong will be talking to us about the sun bear. It's a very, even though it looks iconic, it's actually quite a neglected large mammal in Southeast Asia. To share a little bit about the center that he operates, the Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Center, whose main aim is to conserve the sun bears through holistic approaches, and they incorporate improving animal welfare, education, which is important, but also research, rehabilitation, and promoting ecotourism as a form of livelihood. Dr. Wong, I'd like to welcome you to this virtual stand, please. Over to you.
Okay,
and it's nice to meet you in person.
Oh,
virtually,
yeah, sure.
Sorry, virtually, yes.
Well, good to see everybody, heard about all the big names over there as well. So great. So right now I'm in Sepilo Sanakan here in Sabah. And let me start sharing my screen. And well, today I'm going to talk. Can you see my screen okay, right? All right, wonderful. Yes. So today's, well, thank you very much for this opportunity for me to share my stories about the works that I've been doing for more than 20 years on the lovely, charismatic, cute sun bears. Yeah, and so I got 10 minutes. Right now I got 9 minutes. All right, so saving sun bears is my theme. So sun bears, as most of you know, just like what what Jessica said, is the most neglected large mammal in Southeast Asia. They are listed under the ASEAN Red Book listing as vulnerable species, and they are found across Southeast Asia, ranging from eastern tip of India, eastern tip of Bangladesh, Myanmar, southern China, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Peninsula of Malaysia, Sumatra, and Borneo. There are 2 different subspecies: the Bornean subspecies found on islands of Borneo, and the mainland subspecies of the Malayan sun bear found on Asian mainland and Sumatra. And then they are, again, the least known bear in the world. They are the smallest bear in the world. And then the ecology of Malayan sun bear was not known until I started my work some 24 years ago on the islands of Borneo. At the times, there was, back in 1998, there was 3 different, including myself, 3 different researchers working on the ecology of Malayan sun bears. And it takes us quite a while to study this very elusive, rare animal, very shy animals. And then I used to like trap them, put radio collar, and then trap them down in the forest and try to piece all the small puzzle of their natural history and their ecology together. And then we found out that, they are, well, obviously they are omnivores, they eat a lot of things, and they play many important ecological roles in our forests. So when people ask me, why do we need to protect our sun bears, and this is the answer. First, they are forest planted. They are critical seed dispersal in the forest. When they eat fruits, they swallow the seed. The seed will pass through their digestive tracts. Few hours later, come up in their poo, germination occur, and that includes the forest durian. When we eat our Musang King, when we eat our fancy durian, we don't swallow our durian seed, right? But the sun bear do eat and swallow whilst durian seed, and therefore they disperse. They plant wild durian tree and other more than 100 kinds of wild trees in the forest. So they are forest planter, very important seed dispersal. They are forest doctor when they feed on termite. There are many termite species like the microcerotermites are known to attack live tree. So when sun bear feed on this group of termite, it actually controls the termite population from over exploding and kill many trees at one time and maintain the balance or the equilibrium of the forest. They are also known as forest engineer when they feed on beehive, the stingless beehive. Sun bears are known as also called beruang madu, the honey bears, and they love honey. When they eat honey, one group of the honey is the stingless bee. Stingless bee build their hive inside a hollow tree trunk. So they will climb up to the trees, use their very strong claws and strong canine, rip apart the tree trunk and excavate and expose the cavity and get the beehive and the honey. And then and that cavity is later being used by hornbills and other three cavity nesters. So they build nests for other animals. Very important. They also love to eat earthworms. When they do eat earthworms, they do a lot of digging. They plow the soil. They enhance the soil nutrient cycle and make it easy for other seeds, other plants to grow. They also food provider. When they feed on termite, decay wood for beetle larvae, termite nests and so on, there's always something left behind, and then the always something left behind would be exploited by other animals like the bearded pigs, like the pheasants, like the brown cuckoo and other birds as well. So in return, these animals actually give alarming call to the bears when there's any danger around. So it's a mutualism relationship, that kind of a relationship happening in the forest. So all in all, they play many important ecological roles in a forest. A forest with bears and a forest without bear will be a very different forest. So we need to protect the bears as much as we can. And then from the study, we also know that they are, they occupy a large area. They need big home ranges. They feed on, again, many kind of fruits. But the fruits in our forest do fluctuate in terms of like fruit productions. Of our forest is produced the fruits in the supra-annual cycle called mass fruiting, and then during the intermass interval have very few fruits in the forest, and therefore they are extremely vulnerable on this kind of forest ecology fluctuation in terms of forest productivity. And their habitat, most importantly, is the lowland deep tropical forest, which used to be carpeted across Southeast Asian landscape, but no longer there. And then plus they also have many hard life and many challenges to live in the wild. They may face food shortages, they may compete with other bear species, predations, diseases, parasite, you name it. So they have a hard life. And this is already natural happening. But what happened over the last 60 years is that deforestation across Southeast Asia has wiped out their habitat. Sun bears and other important wildlife species are forest-dependent species, and they need the forest to survive. And we see Borneo, half of the forest gone. Most of the Southeast Asia, a lot of the forest cover already gone. So this is something that we need to do to help them. And then plus, they are hunted down for their meat, for their gallbladder. And then they are kept for pets and so on. Bears as very cute as they are little. Yeah, so this kind of story, Malaysian singer caught keeping a sun bear at home. She thought it was a dog. Ladies and gentlemen, do you believe her? I don't. Yeah, so anyway, so it shows you how serious is this issue of pets keeping of sun bears, and I see so many, and that's why back in 2008, I founded this Borneo Sun Bear Conservation Center in the hope to conserve sun bear through a holistic approach. So the project is a collaborative project with Sabah Wildlife Department, Sabah Forestry Department, and an NGO called LEAD. And our center is based on Sepilok Sandakan here in northern Borneo. And then we have 4 pillars, which is improve animal welfare, education, research, and rehabilitation during the initial stage of our developments. And then later on, we add in ecotourism, community conservation, anti-poaching, captive breeding, all in our scope of objective in order to conserve sun bears through holistic approach. And the keyword here is holistic approach. And we cannot just choose the easy thing to do. And why? Because everything is interrelated. And then, and right now, after 14 years, we have 28 full-time staff and divided into a different unit: environmental education unit, bear care unit, and our sales and admin unit. Yeah, again, our locations, and we have about 5 hectares of land. Half of it is within the Sepilok Forest, Sepilok Kabili Forest Reserve. Is a natural forest reserve where we build our natural forest enclosures, and we do have 2 bear houses. All of the background in this, you can see over in these pictures, are within our forest enclosure. So our rescued bear, can roam semi-freely during the daytimes over here. Some of the pictures of our center. I really hope that you all can come and visit this place. It's a very cool forest, you know, and with all the big trees. So anyway, it takes me 6 years to build everything, and then finally in 2014 we opened to the public, and the public can come and see the bears in the natural environment, can learn about the sun bear, can learn about the rainforest as well. Our work is based on partnership and collaboration, because I, as a biologist, I cannot do everything. You know, just now, one of the speakers had mentioned about partnership, collaboration, and the key for our success is partnership. We do not do everything all by ourselves. So for sun bear rescue, so far we have had 66 sun bear being rescued by Sabah Wildlife Department and sent to us. And currently there are 44 sun bear left at our center. 11 has been released, 10 dead, and so on. So we constantly have this rescue sun bears, and then some of them coming in a very, very sad stage, very, very critical stage, you know, and every bear have their own sad story behind each bear. And every time when we receive a baby bear, means that what? Means the mother has been poached. They are very, very sad. Yeah, so we have to spend a lot of effort trying to rehabilitate them, nurse them, and gain their trust again, and then try to give them, you know, the life back when they used to be in the forest. So yeah, and then education is extremely important. Just now, you know, some of the speaker mentioned about education. Medication is key for conservation success. Education is the foundation for conservation work. So our center is good to have. We have a physical center where we can welcome visitors, school kids come and experience and see the bears, and we also go to schools as well. Yeah, so it's which is extremely important. And then we also produce a series of children's book, you know, as much as we can. And then 2 years ago, Dr. Sarah Pai published my biography book called Saving Sun Bears. And then she also published a series of children's book called Wildlife Wong, you know, and the sun bears and the orangutan and the bearded pigs and the pygmy elephant. And then next week, we are going to launch the 4th book, which is Wildlife Wong and the bearded pigs. Yeah, so hopefully, you know, we can inspire more kids to love our nature, to love our wildlife. And all of these are my personal story working with different species of wildlife. So we also conduct a series of research. These are all of our research partners over the years. And then we try to publish as much as possible. So you can see all of this list from my research kit and so on. We also provide opportunity for volunteers to volunteer at our center. And so on and so forth. Rehabilitation is another thing that we do. A lot of work that we have been putting in rehabilitation over the last 7 years or so. We have released 11 bears. Just 3 days ago, we released Wawa on last Saturday. So we are tracking her movements right now. So yeah, so all of these are a lot of stories to share. And then right now we are working on the Sabah Sun Bear Action Plan. And hopefully you'll get it quick kick started. And ecotourism is a very important pillar because money comes from ecotourisms. And then over the years, we have had privilege, you know, distinguished guests to come and visit us. And something that I call conservation ecotourism is what we are promoting right now, where one of the work that we do is to promote nature-based tourism pay for conservation and even better everything else. You know, it creates the incentive for the governments to protect our forests, to protect our wildlife, and so on. So all is not easy, challenging, especially over the last 2 years when we have this pandemic. You know, our ecotourism pillars have completely collapsed because of the lockdown. So we are trying to survive. Conservation is not easy, but who said it is easy in the first place? But we all have to do it. This is our choice to choose to do this, isn't it? So, all right, my time is up. Thank you very much for your attention. Feel free to check out our social media to learn more about our work. Thank you very much.
Wow, Suti, that was amazing. Could I call you Wildlife Wong from now onwards? I think it's such an awesome nickname.
Yeah. Well, right now we are working on an animation. You know, they're going to make a cartoon of Wildlife Wong. Anyway, so we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Suti, for that wonderful presentation.
You're very welcome.
Moving on to our next speaker, Dr. Kaliaplat. Now, today she'll be telling us a little bit about the work that she's doing in Myanmar, and that is saving 2 critically endangered freshwater turtles. Kalia, over to you, please.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
We can see you, but we can't see your screen yet.
Yeah, I already shared the screen.
Are you using 2 compute? Like, are you using an additional screen, or is it just one screen that you're working? Ah, here it is. We're
Yeah.
seeing something. Yep.
Okay, now it's okay. Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Kalia Platt, and then today I'm going to talk about what we're working on to recover critically endangered turtles in Myanmar. And all the turtle work here in Myanmar is a collaboration between Turtle Survival Alliance, Wildlife Conservation Society, and Myanmar Forestry Department, Wildlife Division, and also WRS and Mandai Nature for start of this project and Burmese roof turtles. So firstly, I would like to give you a little bit background of Myanmar turtles and tortoises. You know, we have 26 species of freshwater turtles and tortoises in Myanmar, and 8 of them are already, 8 of them are endemic species. You know, unfortunately, from those 26 species, 18 of them are already threatened, including 7 endemic species are threatened as a critically endangered or endangered. That's why our conservation action is urgently needed to save those species before they go extinct. So with our limited resources, you know, we now focused on the critically endangered and mostly endemic species, and also a species which is very popular in the illegal wildlife trade. So those conservation works are our priority species to save, such as Burmese star tortoise, Burmese roof turtles, big-headed turtles, Arakan forest turtles, and Burmese mountain tortoises. Those are our priority species for conservation. So please let me talk about star tortoise first. This is an endemic to dry zone of central Myanmar. And since 1990s, the species has become very popular in the rampant collecting for pet trade in illegal trade in 1990s, and also habitat loss and chronic subsistence harvest over a long time make this species become ecological extinct by early 2000s. So we started our ex situ conservation strategies since then. But at the beginning, it's a lot of rooms to improve. And also, we started with the 175 confiscated tortoises. When you have a confiscation, the situation is really, really bad. Confiscated tortoises cannot be recovered within a short period. So at the beginning, its reproduction rate were very low, and we have to save them to survive first. And then with a lot of improvement over a few years, now we have more than 2,000 hatchlings reproduced every year. And we have more than 10,000 captive star tortoises in hand. And then when we start establish assurance colonies, the purpose is to produce offspring for head starting and release. So as our ultimate goal is, you know, to re-establish the variable population. So to reach that route, our second strategy is we have to do the reintroductions. So our reintroduction effort started in 2 wildlife sanctuaries already, called Minzong Town and Shui Setlaw. The total number of 2,800 tortoises already being released. And when we do reintroduction or retranslocation to the wildlife sanctuary, we practice soft release strategy because they need to be, you know, familiar to the release side, as well as their need to engender site fidelity. So we soft we put them in the fence for 1 year. And after 1 year, we open the fence gate and let the star tortoises disperse by themselves voluntarily. We just attach the radio transmitters on the shell and follow them with the radio telemetry 3 times per month. And then, you know, we give our smart patrol for protection, as well as, you know, all the scientific data collecting, and then, you know, take care of all the threats and give the best protection as much as we can, because of star tortoise is very valuable in Myanmar. 1 tortoise, they can trade with 2 buffalo, you know, so a lot of stealing attempts were, you know, occurred. So we have to do a lot of our scientific work as well as the protection a lot. And but you know, quite successful during the last 5 to 8 years effort in 2 national parks. So we are now going to replicate the same methods to another wildlife sanctuaries called Chatin. Now in Chatin, we already started with a lot of education programs for the first 2 years. That's where, you know, we are doing the great collaboration between WCS, TSA, and Mandai. And the third strategy for star tortoise is what we do is egg translocations. Egg translocation is a novel strategy in tortoise conservation in the world. We can experiment egg translocation because we have more than 5,000 to 7,000 eggs per year from 3 different star tortoise captive breeding centers. That's why we can, you know, experiment. If it is successful, then, you know, we can, this is the better natural selection on hatchlings, as well as more economic than head starting. That's why we use that method in Maison Down and Chuisetor. The eggs were translocated from assurance colony to the wild. And at the beginning, the results were discouraging, but with a lot of improvement, increased success from 2018, 2019 onwards. So that's what we are working on, star tortoise, but not to go to extinct. Now let me go to Burmese roof turtles. This is another endemic species and like a second rarest species in the world. It's endemic to large rivers in Myanmar, and the last seen by our Western biologist in 1935. So since until 2000, the species was feared extinct. But 2001, our team luckily rediscovered in Chindrin and Dongkawi River, and also rediscovered single remaining wild population in Chindrin River, about 5 breeding females, and probably fewer males because of the annual collection of the nest, the number of eggs, about 50% of them are infertile, probably due to because of shortage of males. So our conservation strategies are started as setting up assurance colony in Mandalay Zoo, Lokananda Wildlife Sanctuary, and Tamanthi Wildlife Sanctuary inside Myanmar, and 1 group in Singapore Zoo. So right now we have more than 250 hatchlings reproduced inside Myanmar, and those are being head started, and we're going to release them to the Chindrin River when they are age of 5 or 6. So on the upper Chindrin River, you know, we practice mixture of in situ and ex situ strategies. We protect all the nesting sites during the nesting season and collect clutches shortly after they lay, and then transfer those eggs to the base camp for incubate. And as soon as they hatch out, we head start the hatchlings. So this graph shows since the program started in 2006 to date, we have saved more than 1,000 Burmese roof turtles in Myanmar. And now already 148 has started turtles were released And the bright side is, after we releasing in 2018, now we have more numbers of fertile eggs are collected in Chinwin, and then annual increment of our hatchlings numbers are higher than before. So lastly, we have 13 projects going on inside Myanmar, but with the time limitation, I just talk about 3 projects. This is the turtle rescue thing. It's big-headed turtles is very high valuable and then popular in the wildlife trade, illegal wildlife trade. So we confiscated more than 8,000 at once in the Thailand and Myanmar border, Tachi Lake town. This species is very rare, but just look at in the pictures, a lot of them are confiscated, and then we this is an example, and other species as well, that if we confiscate it, they are in bad shape. So we have to give them medical treatment, all the husbandry care, around the clock. And also this big-headed turtle case that all the foreigners, Singapore Zoo and all the US Zoo, they all came to help us on time, but even a lot of effort going on, but we could save maybe 20% of only can be, survive. And then now they are being rehabilitated in the Turtle Rescue Center, which is situated on the road to China. And we rehabilitate them, and then as soon as they all are better shape, and we keep them about 1 year, and then return them to their protected area. So for the species, which is very, valuable means, valuable for biodiversity, not about money, the species is very rare, then we will keep them for captive breeding. And if the species is not too rare, and then we can rehabilitate them and release them back to the wildlife protected area. So this is just to show the slides of, our rescue centers for these big-headed turtles. Probably, the highest numbers in the world that you can see these are numbers of big-headed turtles together. So this is my last slide, and I just, would like to share, like, it's very difficult to save the animals before they go extinct. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kalia. And for those last words, I think that's a common thread, right? In almost every single presentation we've sort of heard today. Okay, so last but definitely not least, we have with us as the last speaker for today, but also of session B, Dr. Andy Young. So today, Andy will share with us a bit about her work, right, and which is largely based in Singapore, around the research and conservation of a local icon, the Raffles Bennett Langer. But not only just in Singapore, but also some of her work in Malaysia, because the species is found across the 2 countries. She'll also be highlighting the importance of cross-border collaboration and stakeholder engagement. Once more, right? The people pillars come out very strongly in a lot of these talks. Okay, Andy, and this is at her personal request, but if you'd like to come to the laptop, that would be awesome, and I'll hand the time over to you.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And I would like to echo what Jessica said about the desire to visit Dr. Wong in Sabah and also Kaya in Myanmar. So hopefully we get the chance to do that. Okay, so for the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'll try my best to summarize the motivations behind setting up this species action plan for the conservation of Raffles Bennett Langers in Singapore and Malaysia, and some of the, I would say, solutions that we have found and existing problems that we are still trying to tackle, and hopefully we can try to learn from every one of you. Firstly, so this is a photo of a Raffles Bennett Langer, which is a primate about 7 to 8 kilograms, medium size, that's only found in Singapore and Malaysia. The problem is that not much was known about this species, except that it was found in these 2 countries, in a small area in Singapore, Central Catchment Nature Reserve, and in a few areas in Johor and 1 place in Pahang. So this species is critically endangered, and there is an there was an urgent need to know about the population size, the distribution, how's the genetic health, what's the taxonomy status, and what we can do to help them. Also, there is a lack of awareness in the general public about the existence of these species, and also amongst the government agencies when it comes to what actions need to be taken in order to conserve these species. So with these problems and motivations in mind, in 2016, a workshop was held at the Singapore Zoo, which brought together experts, agencies and organizations from Singapore, from Malaysia, and from ASEAN to come together to brainstorm on what could be done to save this species from extinction. And a Raffles Bennett Langer working group was formed, tasked to oversee the species action plan. There are three main goals of this action plan. Firstly is to save and protect this species and its habitats in the wild. Second is to gather key information about this species, because only with updated information can we then come up with solutions to help this species and habitats. And thirdly, it's to ensure that there are necessary resources and commitment that could be pumped into this action plan and working group. When I say resources and commitment, it means, manpower, volunteer help, funding, and really, I would say the urgency to save this species from extinction. So firstly, we need to know how many individuals are left in Singapore and Malaysia. For Singapore, because we only have a very small population in a small area, we were able to identify each and every individual langurs in Singapore. So here we have just showcasing three families of the Raffles Bennett langurs. This actually took a really long time based on photographs and information from the volunteers in order to come up with this family tree. So we know that in Singapore, there are 70 individuals in 11 groups. This information that we are trying to gather and to track the long-term development of these individuals is very important, because we can then have a better understanding of the growth and development of the individuals, the dispersal, interbirth period of different individuals, so that we can get a better understanding of how they are doing in terms of infant development and also dispersal when they get to sub-adulthood. We're also trying to do the same in Malaysia through partnership with organizations, universities, students, and government agency. So here's just an example of a partnership with Malaysian Nature Society before COVID, that we went to one of the areas in Johor in order to find out how many individuals of the Bennett langurs are left, where are they found, and the threats that they're facing. And through field observations, we were also able to identify interesting behavior, such as the first record of interspecies grooming between the langurs and the macaque. So you can see in the photo, the macaque was actually grooming the Bennett langur. So this was an observation from a student from USM Penang. Also, through field observations, we were able to identify important plant species in the diet of the langurs. So this data could then be shared with government agencies when it comes to trying to restore the habitat using food plant species. Of course, we don't only rely on field observations. A lot of the work that we do also depend on fecal sample. So I have a photo of the langur poop on the screen. We collect fecal samples so that we can actually examine not just the plant DNA found in the poop, but also the genetic health status of the species, the parasite load, and overall, what can we learn about the taxonomic status of this species in relation to other species of primates in the region. So you can see some of the findings that we have gathered so far in the last 5 years. Just now, Dr. Wong also mentioned about the importance of education. This is really true for the work that we're trying to do, which is to educate the general public and also government agencies on the existence of this species and also what we can do to help them. So over the past 5 years, we have given a total of 60 talks to schools, corporates, and the community. So we're talking about, I think that's about an average of 1 talk a month over the past 5 years. We have also reached out to media contacts, and through publications, we're able to actually track the number of media reports on this species. So over the past 5 years, there were at least 60 media reports in the form of news articles, in magazines, in videos, in radio, which also translate to roughly 1 media focus on the species a month. There were also at least 70 media mentions of this species. So we kind of tracked and consolidated how many times the Raffles Bennett language was mentioned in the media. So it's a way for us to have a better understanding of how we are doing in terms of outreach. And with the information gathering and talks and outreach that we are doing, we're also trying to communicate the threats that this species is facing. So here you can see in some of the news articles, we are trying to highlight, for example, the threats of roads when it comes to wildlife species trying to cross between forest fragments, trying to get from one place to another, or when there are developments happening in and around nature reserves that might affect wildlife species like the RBL. So these media articles are also very important to spread the awareness of the threats that these species are facing and what we can do to help them. Talking about outreach and education, another important aspect is to reach out to the community and to get their involvement and commitment to gather information about this species and to contribute to their conservation. So since 2016, fortunately, with the help and support of our volunteers, we were able to conduct citizen science surveys. So every 6 months, we would hold workshops to train volunteers on how to collect data, what information to collect, and where to submit those information. So this is a close collaboration with MParks and the Jane Goodall Institute. Over the past 5 years, we have worked with over 250 volunteers. So each time we have about 40 to 50 volunteers in the surveys. As you can see here, even though we were actually, I would say, interrupted by COVID for a period of time, after that, when the restrictions were eased, a lot of volunteers came back to want to continue to contribute, collecting information on this species. And we really rely on this groundnut community contribution because the information that they collect could potentially be very helpful to eliminate the threats and to help this species. Here is an example where two of the volunteers actually witnessed a langur crossing on the road. So these species usually don't get down to the ground because they are mainly arboreal species and they don't feel very comfortable traveling on the ground. But here, and also with other photo submission from the volunteers, we were able to narrow down a few hotspots of where the langurs were using the road to cross between forest fragments. And with that information, we were able to work with the National Parks Board to identify key areas to install artificial structures such as rope bridges in order to facilitate safe movement of this species and other wildlife. So here is just a clip from National Parks Board on one of the first use of the bridge by the langurs. At the very far end of the video, you can see there's one langur actually sitting on a tree waiting to cross, while the first one bravely crossed and was really curious about what this device is trying to track the movement. So with the installation of cameras like this, we were then able to identify species that use the bridges and the frequency that they cross on these bridges, the direction that they use to travel on these bridges, and also how we can actually modify the structure in order to improve the usage for other species as well. Speaking of outreach and also stakeholder engagement, we rely a lot on communications with our partners in Singapore and Malaysia. So here are just some examples of the working group, photos of the working group members and the meetings that we have held so far in the past few years, where we will share information about this species, current status, problems that we face, what can we do to move forward into the future. And with their help and the information that were gathered, we were able to produce the first book on this species of Singapore and Malaysia that was just published last month. No, 2 months ago already. So if you're interested to find out more about this species, feel free to get a copy with a discount over here. Moving forward, my last 2 slides. We have been trying to, I would say, come up with different ways to study this species more efficiently to collect more data over time. And so we're experimenting with camera traps on the trees. here are just some examples of images that we have collected so far. On the top left, you can see that a few photos like this could indicate, or I would say inform us of the usage of the areas within a habitat by different species. In this case, the 3 native primates of Singapore, loris, macaque, and langur, on the same tree at different times. So niche partitioning and the usage of the habitat by different species are also very important when it comes to understanding the core habitats of the wildlife. And then on the top right corner, you could see this actually is a collage, I would say. Yeah, so it's like a photo, 3 photos of the langurs traveling from one end to the next of within this nature reserve that we were trying to monitor their movement. And so this photo actually showed us how they travel, and based on thousands of photographs that we have gone through, we could see how many times they have used this area and in which direction. And then at the bottom left, you could see that this is actually an image of a langur, trust me. So here is actually a camera trap photo that was taken at about 1:30 a.m. I would say that before seeing this image, we would think that most of the time the langurs are only active in the day. But there are times where the langurs might be active in the night, and using camera trap images like this could help us understand more about their behavior throughout the day. And then at the bottom right, you could see the langur actually coming down to the ground to travel when there were no sufficient canopy connectivity. So photos like this could really help us understand more about the behavior of the langurs on top of few observations when we carry out in the field. And also we are trying to monitor, moving forward, different wildlife species within the same habitat. So here is, you have the sambar deer, you have the basset mouse deer, you have the wild pig, and also a photo of the pangolin. We are hoping that we could really improve our, I would say, use of these camera traps with more units, not just being installed in Singapore, but also in Malaysia. All right, so thank you very much for your attention, and welcome all the questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for that very nice presentation on our local icon. Looking at the picture of monkey poop made me realize how bottoms up your work really is. But anyway, so I'd like to get everyone together to thank our 3 speakers for session B of the species recovery track, where we'll come to the end of the talks, and now we're about to start the panel discussions. And once more, to people in the audience who have questions, feel free to type them in the chat, to the general chat, and the speakers will try to address them either now or later on. So Wildlife Wong, Andy, and Kalia, please show yourselves and come back to to my screen at least, and we can start the second panel discussion. Okay, so I am going to start this off by, I've got some specific questions for each of you, and we'll start now with Andy. We'll start from the end and we'll work our way back to the top. So Andy, you touched a little bit about transboundary cooperation in your talk, very briefly. But maybe if you could elaborate on that a bit more for the audience to really understand the importance of stakeholder engagement, one, but also finding common ground, right, in these cross-border collaborations to actually, ultimately saving a species, like working towards saving a species. That would be great. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Jessica. Stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder is a really loaded term because we are talking about really different groups of people, such as, for example, government agencies. We need to really engage with them to find out more about what could be done in collaboration with the different, I would say, agencies in Singapore and Malaysia. Stakeholder also comes in the form of residents living around the green spaces, around the habitats where the langurs or other wildlife species are found, because we do have in Malaysia, the langurs going to people's gardens, not in Singapore, but in Malaysia, to actually feed on the bananas, and also traveling on the roads to get from one place to another. So how does it affect the community over there? We also have schools around those areas where the langurs are found, And by working with them, we were able to actually get updates from the teachers and the staff when there's Langer roadkill around the school, or those langers that were electrocuted when they were traveling on the cable wires. Also with the schools, we wanted to reach out to them for education efforts to raise awareness about this species, especially if the students were to see the langers, what can they do to gather the information and share those data. We also have civil societies, NGOs, interest groups like hiking groups in one of the nature reserves in Malaysia, because they're really interested to find out more about the diversity of the wildlife there and how they can bring their community in to find out more, and also foreign tourists to come in. So that, like Dr. Wang was sharing about ecotourism, the hiking groups and also the communities were interested in doing that as well. So we're talking about stakeholder engagement in such a wide spectrum. A team of researchers will not be enough to reach out to those. So we need to have, I would say, different experts with different expertise to come in to reach out to different groups, I would say at the same time, ideally. So that would be the stakeholder engagement. And then finding common ground for cross-border collaboration is also a very tough one. Because what is common ground? Because we're talking about different countries, even though we have a shared natural heritage. So this could be a first point to emphasize and highlight when it comes to collaboration. What are the shared natural heritage that require our urgent attention and help? Can we actually identify species that we can work together, through collaboration? And then what differences are there? Because instead of finding common ground, we might really need to identify the differences as well, such as different regulations, different needs, or different kinds of resources and commitments that's available in the different countries. So I think finding common ground and the differences will be really important to move forward.
Awesome, Andy. That was really well addressed. I think really holistic. And I think it goes to show, and I hope the audience here can appreciate that, once more, conservation isn't easy, right? As Andy said, common ground for Singapore, maybe, or what works in Singapore is very different to Malaysia. And you need to work through all those different target audiences slowly, right? Before you can actually find some platform where you can actually start talking. We're not even talking about action, right? It's really to even start the process of communicating before action can happen. All right, Kalia, on to you now. So I think my question is around, your current efforts in species conservation, especially in light of certain setbacks, right, faced in Myanmar, specifically the ongoing one, the crisis that's coming. How are you keeping this going, I guess, and what attempts have you, how have you tried to address it, right, to continue saving species despite what's going on? Yeah, thanks, Kalia.
Okay, thank you for your question. Yes, there are, like for species recovery, we have a lot of struggles, just to think about how many challenges we have now, not think about COVID and then political situations, what happened in Myanmar yet. Just bringing back species before they go extinct. It has a lot of commitment we got to do for, conservation work in Myanmar because of, if compared to like starting from biological data, we don't have much information about to start with. So we have to do a lot of scientific research, as well as the, all the this captive breeding, learning and doing actual work at the same time. And once we started, it's a long-term commitment to us. We cannot just start the project and the work. We cannot do that by assuming this species recovered, this species, it's okay, we solved the problem. We cannot do that. That's why we have a lot of struggles to keep going to this species recovery programs, and especially when this COVID travel restrictions happened and political situations, in Myanmar. It's very difficult for us day-to-day challenges, starting from getting money from ATM. It's a big work for us, difficult to find getting funds into Myanmar as well because of the sanction, So it's and also not very safe to travel around the country, and a lot of areas are very conflict and a lot of explosions going on, and especially when we work with the government, employees on the project, and maybe like 60%, 70% of them want on CDMs, so we have a shortage of manpower as well. So, and also enforcement team now is they are more focused on the fighting, not really a wildlife enforcement things now. And economy become in Myanmar, it's very terrible shape because of the situation. So poor people, I mean like people who live in relying on the natural resources, they have to rely more on their natural resources, So a lot of things to tackle and then struggle, but fortunately, how we overcome this is we have this project started quite a long time, or like about 1 decade already, and we have recruited many of our staff, like the whole country, more than 50 staff are from the community. So they all are based in their own area, and they don't need to travel far each other, so with the COVID and the political situations, but they can work with the restrictions, stay on the side, and then we working on it, to continue this project. And for us is some area we can travel to supervise, some areas we just use the social media to like a video call, and then giving special advice, a kind of like micromanagement, but day-to-day problem solving, and then we can continue this conservation work without too difficult. Our projects can be continued. Yeah. So.
Wow, thank you, Kalia, for that. I think I speak for not only myself, but many people here said that it's such inspiration. I mean, you and your team, and how you're still pushing through, right? Despite ongoing setbacks they're facing. So yeah, no, keep going, I guess. Thanks so much for sharing that your personal account on the situation as well. It's really, really helpful, and I hope it's really eye-opening for many people here, right? Now you mentioned it's not conservation work is hard enough already on its own. All these additional layers sometimes make it much harder, and people are not aware of that. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, Wallif Wong.
Yes. Before you ask me any questions, let me share a little bit of my thought after hearing Kala's talk. I mean, it makes me feel like I'm so lucky to be able to do conservation work in Sabah. Seriously, so lucky. And then giving at all this political stability, economical stability, and Malaysia actually compared to other countries in Southeast Asia, we stick out. We should do a lot more better work compared to other countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, and so on in terms of our conservation because of the political and economic stability. Yeah. So anyway, okay, now you can ask me a question.
Great insights, Wallif Wong. So onto your question. So you touched on this a bit briefly, and maybe to just dissect it a bit more. You mentioned how you've been studying virtual programs. You said the cartoons and the videos and all that, right? I suppose on a similar vein, right? Maybe to tell the audience and share with them your experiences on how COVID has impacted your work. I know COVID has impacted a lot of conservation work across Southeast Asia over the last 2 years, and how you've tried to adapt, right, to this evolving COVID situation.
Okay, sure. Okay, so since 2014, our center has opened our door to visitors, and then we actually make money from tourists, from visitors, yeah. And then during the pandemic, of course, from March 18, 2020, the lockdown, and we have been closing our doors to the whole country has been shut down since then. So in terms of our revenues that we generated from the visitors, it's all go down to zero. And that is a huge impact. And because, we have at the times 45 bears to feed, and then 28 or 29 full-time staff, and then plus all the maintenance, the cost of running the center is very, very high. So I'm in a panic mode, and then immediately I asked the people, I do a pledge on my social media and ask people to donate to us, adopt our bears. And also, we also run this virtual tour in order to make a little bit of money out of, I mean, better than nothing. Like, you know, we have our facilities, we have our bears, and the wolves are like, you know, going crazy. It's work from home and stay from home, kids going crazy, you know, just stacking from. So that kind of thing can ease up a little bit of our financial, but again, we still need big money. And we are very thankful from some of our big donors come and help us, especially Hazana Foundation, especially the Yayasan Samdabi Foundation to come and save us. So this is one thing in terms of revenues. And then in terms of our work, of our education work, we have to shut down. We have to shut down all of our education work, going to do education outreach. We cannot go, we cannot gather, we cannot get the school people coming. So our education has moved a lot to online as much as possible, you know. And then say, for example, on May 16, when we celebrate the International Sunbear Days, we have to do it virtual Sunbear Days, you know, going to online and then do a virtual tour and things like that, and try to engage the visitors and the audience and the supporters as much as possible, especially when we have big groups of, you know, supporters across the world that they are following our social media and that are very, very good. At least we still can have something to do from that. And thankfully, we are an essential sectors, means that we still can come and work. You know, we cannot work from home. Actually, half of our staff during that time was, during the critical time, was working from home. The education team worked from home, but the bear team and myself come here. Yeah. And then what else impacted rehabilitation? The bears that we just released last year, a few days ago, we are supposed to release her last year, but because of this pandemic, and then because of this movement restriction, and also, you know, there was 3 attempts we tried to release it. There was one time because of the restriction got tightened up, we cannot go, we have to cancel. And then the second time or the third time is all like, the last minute, and then suddenly we got positive test with one of our team got, you know, tested positive, we cannot go. Or the next, or the orangutan center have tested positive. And at the times that was before the vaccination. So the cases where people got infected become very sick and very ill, and it was a big concern. So it was quite a challenging times over the last 2 years, more than 2 years now, I have to say. But hopefully whatever don't kill us will make us stronger lah. Yeah, so we survive, and hopefully, finger crossed, that our border will be opening soon. This Omicron thing is going to like help us to reach our herd immunity, and then and we have to treat the virus as another flu virus law. Yeah.
And just to reiterate that Andy and I are signing up for a trip to your site.
Wonderful, wonderful. You should come here long time ago.
I know. I feel it's long overdue.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Suti, thanks so much for sharing those insights. I think quite often when we talk about COVID, we always see what's close to us, right? How COVID impacts our lives, right? Wearing masks, not being able to go out, and that's for a lot of us here.
Yes, and then speaking about COVID, there's one thing that I think the world does not do enough, which is what caused the COVID. Hey, we should speak more about what caused the COVID, about habitat destructions, about wildlife trade, about humans and wildlife getting closer and closer, and we did not keep wildlife wild, you know, and that caused the COVID. And it's not going to be the last. It's not going to be the last. It is not the first, and it won't be the last.
So it's about high time we start addressing some of the core, right?
Hidden
underlying issues around this. But no, thanks for sharing your insights. Like I said, many people here often see COVID as close to them, right? What actually impacts me directly, but it's really nice to get a sense from you, right? How your work and how conservation and saving a species also impacted, right, by the pandemic. So we've only got 3 minutes, so we're going to have a last general question for all three of you. And Suti, will start with you. I'm going to fuse 2 questions together. So, but please please keep your answers short because we don't have much time.
Okay, sure.
So I guess what's one key learning experience that you've taken away as a conservationist? One, and then the last one is the same as the first panel session. What's one piece of advice you would share with the audience here who are potentially budding conservationists? So one as in your work portfolio, and one as a personal, right? What's one key advice?
Yeah, okay. So I think, you know, well, for me, working with Sunbear for the last, you know, more than 20 years, is my choice. You know, once I chose it because I love it, it is from my heart. Nobody forced me to do it. So whether it's good or bad, I have to swallow it. You know, so I think it is good that we know that this is our choice and we cannot blame other people. And then some of the previous speakers have talked about, you know, it's not easy and it is extremely rewarding after you see the situation being improved. And then, and what is the second part of the question again?
What's one piece of advice, a personal advice you would share with the audience?
Sure. Okay. So I always tell people, do what you do best to help conservation, to help sun bears. You know, think about what you do best. I think for, you know, doing conservation work, everybody have a role. You know, species like sun bears, you know, very, very little known. There's so many work that we need to do. So think about what you do best, and eventually you can take part if your heart is in here. Thank you.
Kali, over to you, please.
It's me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, you know, my advice will be, please just do what you love to do, you know, just follow your dream. Because conservation work is not easy, but if you really like to do it, just, I feel like I'm playing in the field, you know, not having pressure on me. Working in the field as a conservation biologist is, it's just like you playing with fun animals, you know, being surrounded by people who, you know, have the same interest with you in the field, you know, they're very innocent as well. So just, but you really have to love your work. Otherwise, you know, staying in the field is quite challenging. So if you love to do your work, it is just like conservation thing. It's just like playing in the field. I really love it. Yeah.
Thanks, Kali. Commitment is certainly a core tenet of conservation. And Andy, for you to end off this Q&A session, please.
I think one thing I learned is that you can never repeat too many times. So I've learned to be a broken recorder, keep, you know, spreading the same message over and over and over again, because I realized that by doing that, we can then, you know, reach out to more and more people. And then second thing, in terms of advice, I would like to steal what Bing Wen said just now about celebrating little successes, because what we're doing can get really depressing. So being able to celebrate the little successes that you manage to achieve, it's an important trait to have. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Yep, conservation is an uphill battle, right? As a climb or whatever it is, as they always say. Okay, and that really wraps up the Q&A discussion and panel discussion for Track 2 Session B, but also this ends the entire you know, speaker session of today's event. Without further ado, I'll hand the time back to Sean, who will take us to the next session. Over to you, Sean. And once more, thanks to our speakers of Session B. So maybe a virtual round of applause, please.